What's up guys, welcome back to Fancy Goldfish Fanatics. Today we are doing another episode of Rate My Tank, so make sure you stay tuned to find out more. Hey Fanatics family, welcome back. As always, check out those links in the description and make sure to check out our sponsors, Star Fisheries and Jimmy Goldfish USA. The discount code for Jimmy Goldfish is down in that description. So today we are going to be doing another episode of Rate My Tanks. Today we have some slightly smaller tanks, and I believe we've got one pond on the video as well. We've got some slightly smaller tanks because I want to show you guys how you can still keep those fancy goldfish, albeit in a smaller, more affordable tank for some of those people who don't quite have the budget to keep an enormous tank. So we're going to have a look at those different tanks on the screen in a minute. We're going to talk about all the positives and negatives and how we would change or maybe slightly develop the setups that we have on the video. As with all of our Rate My Tanks, there is no negative comments. We are all happy vibes here, and everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and everyone can have their goldfish tank set up and run in a different way. So without further ado, I'm going to get those videos on the screen and let's take a look at what today's video holds. Now, just before I get into rating each tank, I just wanted to say the majority of these tanks are quite small, and I wanted to do this video in particular on the smaller sized Rate My Tank videos. Quite a few of the videos also aren't the best footage or aren't shot as I would generally shoot them myself, as they have been submitted by you guys, the viewers. So just bear that in mind if you are going to be submitting some videos yourself. But when I'm rating all of these tanks, I want to say that I'm not comparing them to one another. I'm just comparing them to how I would slightly change them or improve them potentially. So up first, we have this absolutely lovely tank. I'm really liking the rockscape and the addition of those natural plants. Looks like we have some pygmy chainsword, some bucephalandra, and maybe some vallisneria. Looks to be that there may potentially be a hang-on back filter, and we've got a few different variety of fancy goldfish. Now these will obviously get larger and potentially require a much larger system as they grow up, but I'm really liking the use of other fish. We haven't got any Cory catfish, which can be potentially dangerous to fancy goldfish, which is always good to see. But it does look like we have the addition of potentially a few other fish. They look like some sort of small rainbow fish, not your traditional large rainbow fish, but anyway, they look quite nice with the fish. And obviously small fish will always be a threat to fancy goldfish. They may potentially eat them, but if you're happy with losing a few fish here and there, then I don't see this being too much of a problem. Overall, I really like the scape of the tank. Potentially I'd add a little bit more aeration for the number of fish in here, and we can't obviously see the filter, so potentially I would add a little bit more filtration. But overall, I'm going to give this tank a 4 out of 5 stars. So next up, we have a red cap around the tank. Now first, just before we focus on this tank, we can see quite a few things standing out to us. Firstly, at first glance, this tank looks overstocked and underfiltered. So now we start to look a little bit closer. Once our mind has jumped to the things that stand out completely to us, a good sign of this tank's health is the increased water flow and bubble curtain at the back of the tank. Now that bubble curtain is going to be providing lots of oxygen to these fish, and it looks like there's plenty of aeration and surface agitation for the number of fish in the tank. However, generally I can't see any sort of external canister filter. There looks to be a power head at the back of the tank, which would lead me to believe that there is an overhead filter, which generally doesn't provide the filtration needs that we require in a fancy goldfish tank in particular. Maybe if this tank was stocked with some 10 guppies or 10 tetras, it would be sufficient. However, with fancy goldfish, they're very dirty, so if you haven't got a suitable sized filter, I would definitely be doing very regular water changes. Now these fish are 100% going to outgrow their tank, and keeping them in here for a long period of time is actually cruel to the fish. They are absolutely fine in this tank as young, from 1 to 2 inch fish, and would be fine in there for a few months. But generally, in my personal opinion, these fish are going to need at least a 150 litre tank, and that is on the sort of cautious side. Ideally, they would go into something around the 300 litre mark, but they look nice and happy and healthy. The water looks nice and pristine, but we need to make sure we're doing regular water changes on a tank like this. Also, I would potentially change that substrate. Although gravel is a natural style substrate to have with fancy goldfish, there is always the chance of them swallowing this or getting it lodged in their mouth, causing potential injury or fatality. So there's quite a few things I would change about this system. Overall, the fish look happy and healthy, which is the main thing, but over the long term, I definitely would improve a few things about this system. Make sure to keep up on those water changes, make sure there is sufficient biomedia and a good mechanical filter that is cleaned regularly. Overall, because of all of those points, I'm going to give this tank a 3 out of 5 stars. But overall, fish look healthy, just I would make quite a few tweaks to it. Next up, we have this other tank. You'll notice initially this tank is very well stocked, and there is also a better tank as well next door, but we're not going to be focusing on the better tank. That was just part of the video that I placed onto this video. But overall, looking back at the main tank, we can see there is quite a few goldfish and what looks to be a few other fish. Now, the other fish aren't too much of an issue. They look to be potentially some zebra danios or some leopard danios. But I would say, personally, although I try not to critique people on stocking levels, this tank is overstocked, unfortunately. It looks like there is a small filter with a sponge on it and a spray bar. Although we've got a little bit of aeration, which is nice to see, I definitely would really decrease the stocking level in this tank or upgrade the fish. So I'm not going to focus too much on this tank for now. I'm unfortunately going to give this tank a 2 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have another submission by one of our subscribers, and I really like this setup. Now, potentially the tank could be a little bit larger for these fish, but these fish look absolutely happy and healthy as they are for now, and they potentially will grow and outgrow this tank. Looks like we've got 2 hang on the back filters. Now, this video was quite short, so I have duplicated it, so you will see it come around twice. I'm really liking the minimalistic escape with the Java ferns and those rocks. Potentially, I would use some sort of river stones if I was going to be rescaping this tank. Something that's quite nice and smooth for the fish, so there is no potential damage if they do start to breed. These fish, however, look like they are at quite a young age, and potentially breeding is out of the picture at the moment. So I'm sure those rocks will be absolutely adequate. One thing I may change about this tank is adding a couple of air stones to the back to increase that water flow. But with the stocking level and good water change and filter maintenance, the fish will be absolutely fine in here. I would say for the next potentially 12 months before looking at restocking or slightly changing the layout of the tank. Overall, I really like the layout of this tank, so I'm going to give it a 4.2 out of 5 stars. Now, next up, we have more of a pond setup. We can see there is quite a lot of fish in here, but we do have lots of water volume. It looks to be this tank is heated, so the fish are potentially kept nice and warm, fed quite a lot, so regular water changes are a must, as the metabolism of the fish is at a potentially higher rate than other tanks that aren't heated. It looks like we've got some really stunning examples of fancy goldfish in this system. Some really nice Ryukin, pearl scales, Ranchu, Oranda, and I'm really liking this setup. It would be nice to have a bit more focus on the filtration and maybe know a little bit more about the maintenance scheme, but I really like the bare minimalistic look. Easy for water changes, easy to keep the tank nice and clean for the fish. Potentially, as this is a pond, I would look at adding 1, 2, or potentially even 3 water lilies and maybe some oxygenating plants. Generally, plants are ripped to shreds by our fancy goldfish, but some hardy and quite robust water lilies would be quite nice in this, not only reducing the nitrates, nitrite and ammonia in the system, but also providing some cover and a sort of natural look to the system. Overall, I really like this tank, but I would generally make a few different changes to it. I really love the stocking and the fish are absolutely superb. I'm going to give this tank a 4.1 out of 5 stars. So I hope you enjoyed this Rate My Tank episode. Hopefully I've given you guys who don't quite have the budget for a large, fancy, showy, expensive, fancy goldfish tank, what you can do with a smaller tank and what you can really get set up in your home, even if you haven't got that much space either, potentially. But we had some absolutely great tanks on the video today, lots of different techniques and different styles, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you want to have your tank featured in the Rate My Tank episode, or you want to have a full video of your setup on our tank tour series, then pop me a comment or send me an email down below at fancygoldfishfanatics@gmail.com and we can get your tank on the video. So as always, thank you all for watching. Remember to keep those water changes up and happy fish keeping.